Salutations, I'm Salutations, and today I've got a new video for you guys. So this is going to be the Road to OPness on Shock Gaige. Yes, I know that sounds wrong, that's intentional. So we are going to be rocking Shock Gaige to get to the highest OP levels we possibly can. We're gonna see how long this lasts. The goal is to get to OP 10 at first, and then potentially go above that. I would love to go above that if I can pull that off, but I don't know if I'm good enough at this game yet. We'll see. We'll see. But I've had a lot of fun with this variant of Shock Gaige. I'm not exclusively using Shock on this build, but Shock is the main focus. I do have a couple corrosive weapons, a couple fire weapons on me that I'm going to be using for some of the enemies, but for the most part I'm using Shock. The shield that I'm using for the most part, I'm going to say that word like 6 times today, I am utilizing the Transformer. I love this shield in BL3. It's one of my favorites to use when it comes to using like semi-meta gear. The Transformer on launch and for a while was the #1 shield. It pretty high absorption rate, but the main thing was that it granted you immunity to shock damage and absorbed shock damage as shields. And so you could utilize it to become nigh invulnerable. But in Borderlands 2, the issue with it when it comes to using it in comparison to Borderlands 3 is if you deal damage that is over the shield capacity, your HP starts to take damage. That doesn't happen in Borderlands 3. And so that was kind of like a little like shocking to me. I was kind of just like, what? Yes, shocking with the Transformer. Who would have guessed? But yeah. This build I had a lot of fun with. I'm on OP 0 right now. I already have unlocked from OP 0 to OP 10 on this character, but this is also a gibbed character, so I'm currently going back through and running through the OP levels just to see how far I can get running Digistruct Peak. This was the character that I used for running Captain Flint with OP 0 gear, no Anarchy, and I am still using no Anarchy. No Anarchy is used here. I am utilizing the skill in Red Tree, though, for reload speed. Of course, the mag size decrease is kind of a bummer, but the reload speed has been super helpful, especially for when I need to pull out the Norfleet or when I am utilizing the Bada Boom for rocket jumping or something. I need to go get a shock one. I might farm for that later. That sounds like fun. I need to get a low-level shock Bada Boom. That's kind of what I want. If possible, get like a quick drawler shock Bada Boom. Yeah. But I didn't find this out until really late into the run, but the freaking chain lightning is extremely strong on Shock Gaige at this stage. Going at OP 0, you chuck the grenade, and a lot of things, like a lot of trash mobs, just die. As long as they're slagged, they just freaking melt. And I was using against like Marauders. I think theoretically, if you get the fire dot to apply early enough, you could probably kill a BA Marauder with 1 chain lightning. I haven't really tested it out because I literally discovered how strong it was during the run. And this voiceover is being recorded like directly after I did the run. But that was crazy. I was shocked. There was a lot of this where I just used the Norfleet and the Transformer for killing trash mobs, just simply because I didn't feel like freaking wading through the slugfest of shooting the slow hand at the ground for eternity. Although, what I should have done, and I started doing later in the run, was just chucking chain lightnings. The grenade regens itself. There's a boatload of ammo crates. I'm never going to run out of grenades unless I am throwing too many of them. You should only throw, like, 1, or if you don't land the shock dot, 2 at most at an enemy, and those will chain towards all of the other enemies in the area. So you're getting a lot of shock dots to apply, and you don't You don't need to worry about it. The only thing you need to worry about is applying slag to all your enemies, which I actually started utilizing the Norfleet for slag, funny enough, like a Shock Norfleet for slag, utilizing the skill at 5 points. I forget what it's called. I'm not a BL2 main. Let me pull up the skill really quick. Let's see here. Interspersed outburst. Words. I can't English today. Actually, I don't think I can English ever. But at 5 points, hold on. Let me go down the tree. So at 5 points, there's a 3.5% chance to slag, and with max stacks, you're dealing about, well, at per stack, you're dealing about 10k per stack of slag damage as bonus damage there. So about 50,000 damage roughly at max stacks with +5. And in this setup, utilizing the catalyst, I had +10, which is interesting. It was really high slag chance for just shooting a Norfleet. So I was like, well, we're just gonna do that. Also, I tried to use it against the Super BA slag skags. What I should have done, like what I did with all of like the tanks later on, is I should have just backed off, swapped to my B shield, and got like a fire or shock weapon, and just started hounding them. Especially since they don't really take dots very well. It was very difficult to get a dot to apply to one of these jerks. But I did just Norfleet them to death at some point. So it worked out in the end. But I'm definitely not doing that for future runs. That was a lot of rocket ammo to use. Really good thing about the Transformer, though, I don't need to swap to like a Sham or anything to regen rocket ammo. I could just run around with my Bada Boom, and by rocket jumping, I'm passively getting a net positive amount of rockets back. Sure, it's like 1 or 2 per magazine that I'm actually getting back, but it's still net positive, and so I will make up that rocket deficit by the time I actually need to use the Norfleet again. I've been loving playing around with Shock Gaige so much. It very much warms my heart to come back to this game freaking years later and still be able to play Shock Gaige. I used to main Shock Gaige back when I played the game a lot. I was either playing Shock Gaige or I was playing a Ahab, Pimpernel, Salvador setup. And that was really about it. I don't really play too much else. I messed around with Melee Zero a little bit. I messed around with Sniper Zero a little bit, but I never really like fully fleshed out one of those characters. I got it to max level and stuff, but I didn't like flesh out the playstyle for it. I kind of just did whatever the meta was back then. For this little bit, I kind of just tested the water to see how much damage I'd be doing without the B shield. And then the reason why I'm using the B shield in this at all is there's a fun little thing where when you swap shields, the shield capacity is left in the shield is based on the amount that you had in the last one. If you had, let's say, 976,000 shield capacity before you swap, and your new shield has 1.7 million, you're only going to have 900 and something thousand shields. So what I was doing was I could swap, well, what the plan was I could swap to the B shield, and then once it took damage, instead of requiring buck up, I could just swap to the Transformer, shoot myself the slow hands, and then switch back to the B shield and keep shooting. Which I found to be pretty consistent once I actually started doing it. Instead, because I was just like freaking shoot thing, rocket. I just shot a corrosive Norfleet. Again, this is me learning. So I kind of just like had a whole bunch of failsafe weapons, and then it had some other stuff that I just wanted to play around with, just to see if it would work or different things I want to try out. Mostly because I need to go to bed, like, really soon, and I wanted to get this recorded and done, because I'm not going to be able to record this the day that I usually do. So I just needed to get the run done. That was that. But it did end up working out. Also, I love the Varrook. The Varrook has been super fun to play with. With the B shield, you just pop B shields, and then the extra projectiles that come out from it are amazing. The Varrook is one of my favorites right now. The for Hatterax runs on Gaige, I think my favorite right now has got to be the Godfinger for knocking down Hatterax. It's not the most effective, don't get me wrong, but I have actually enjoyed using the Godfinger for the knockdown instead of using a Lady Fist or a Lyuda or something like that. Which, with Gaige, I couldn't really use the Lyuda very well, even without Anarchy. I would show up with the Lyuda, and sure, it would do the job at some point, but it was slower than the Godfinger for me. For the most part, I bet it's probably not gonna turn out the same way for you guys, mostly because a lot of you are probably more attuned to using the Lyuda than the Godfinger, and I'm over here a masochist and purposefully not using the Lyuda until I absolutely needed to or wanted to showcase it for a video. Oh, this is where I think this is where I was testing out like the freaking chain lightning. Yep, right here. Look at that. Look at that. Freaking blaster nomads. 2 grenades. One of them really only took 1 grenade after the slag. That was nuts. If I get like, ooh, I should go get a slag Norfleet. That might be a good idea. Because then I could use the Norfleet to slag a huge area of enemies and to just chuck a chain lightning and that dots everybody. Ooh, that sounds like fun. I don't know how effective that's going to be going up in the higher OP levels, but right now, that seems like a lot of fun. I'm going to have to play around with some other stuff too. I have some fibbers on here. I wanted to play around and see if I could make those work without Nth Degree and potentially without the B shield, but I just haven't gotten around to it. I am probably overworking myself again, but that's fine. I have a habit of doing that. Let's see here. I think this is also, yeah. Chuck dead. Oop. Oh yeah, the BA kind of scared me because it dealt a lot of damage right away. So it's just like, I'm getting rid of you. But I totally could have just chucked another grenade after that first dot wore off, and he probably would have died. If not, I definitely could have just slow-handed the rest. I didn't need the Norfleet there. Although I don't think I needed the Norfleet at all during this run. It was just making up for me being bad at the game, I suppose. Boop. I also have to get used to running Digistruct Peak more. I haven't touched this content in such a long time. When I realized how rusty I was at Peak when I was running on my Salvador. Because I was getting downed on a Salvador that's meant to, I don't know, outlive raid boss damage. I'm just over here just like down after down because I'm not paying attention or like messing up the rotations. Just like, just freaking stop it. Just stop. What the heck was I doing over here? Oh yeah, I was deciding on what I wanted to use for dealing with this guy, and I decided on the Varrook. Because usually, like, before I used the Varrook, I was using the Sandhawk for this stuff. And I was like, well, that's something that people typically use. Let's try something a little bit offbeat that I know would probably still work. Maybe the Varrook. That ended up being what that was. Now, something nice about Shock Gaige is how strong the actual shock damage bonus is. It isn't that big, but in my opinion, it doesn't need to be that big. It's just strong enough to make up for the, like, to be about the same as matching elements. And I really think that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be a giant damage boost or anything. Just simply because you're mostly relying on that dot damage anyways. There's not really much else that you want to focus on. You're getting a lot from your class mod skills and the skills that you have in your skill tree for dot damage. So you don't need to focus on that impact damage with your shock damage. Now, will that help with the initial damage? Yeah. Is that going to be overly helpful up until you get to the OP levels? No, not at all. And that amount of damage is just enough to where I don't need to worry if I'm selecting shock or if I'm selecting corrosive to kill things. Corrosive is going to do better against armored enemies that are like shock resistant, but I've even killed shock resistant enemies with shock damage with the amount of stuff that I have in the skill trees. Or I just shoot a Norfleet at it, because that apparently was my decision to just get through the content. Yeah, realistically, I could have just chain lightninged and slow-handed my way all the way through. Other than maybe the slag skags and the armored spiders. And with the spiders, that would really just come down to me learning the attack patterns. And once I learned that, it wouldn't take very long to just dodge and dot. As long as I was getting all of my status effects applied, I didn't notice any health regen preventing damage being dealt. So my dot damage was shredding as long as I had all of my status effects, my slag, my shock, my fire. I didn't notice any drawbacks from health regen at level 80. We'll see how bad that gets the further along we get in the OP levels, but for now I haven't noticed anything. I also want to try and see if I can complete... I want to see how many I can complete without needing to upgrade gear. If I can get through, like, OP 6 or 7 without needing to update my gear, that would be awesome. But honestly, after playing through this, I don't know if I'm going to be able to... That, at least... At least while having a pleasurable viewing experience. I don't think that's going to be feasible. Although, chain lightning dots will definitely be one of the stronger methods. And then bada boom ammo regen Norfleet spamming is also another option as well. Now, not using a sham makes the Norfleet a bit dangerous. Each projectile has a 55% chance to deal damage to you, and the damage on the Norfleet is way higher than what your Transformer can take. So, don't try and force utilizing a Norfleet at close range. Norfleet is a lot better to be like that mid to long distance launcher, where the only part of the Norfleet damage that you want hitting you is that very, very distant aura damage. That'll still give you, like, rocket ammo. It'll still give you ammo back. Now, something I'm curious about, when I'm attacking with different weapons, I don't know the answer to this, so if somebody can tell me what the answer is in the comments, that would be awesome. If not, I will try and figure it out myself later. But is there a different dot applied for each shock item that I use to deal damage in an instance? Here's an example. when, let's say I slag the enemy and then I chuck a chain lightning and the dot applies. The dot is still going. If I shoot a slow hand, will it now apply the slow hand dot and keep the chain lightning dot if they're the same element? So like they're both shock. Is it gonna stack the DOTs, or is it gonna add them up into the one number? How does that work? Because in Borderlands 3, they don't tend to stack. Like you can have multiple different sources of shock damage that deal dot damage, and it doesn't stack onto one number. And then when you use the 500% elemental crit hits annoying, that's when it adds all of them together and deals a boatload of damage. So the answer for Borderlands 3 is yes, it does stack all of them. For Borderlands 2, I don't know. I haven't tested it. I don't exactly have the time today to test it. If somebody in the comments has the answer, and that would be amazing. And Norfleet ended up saving the run in the end, but that was because I poorly played and not because it wasn't feasible. But yeah, that's the end of this run. I hope y'all enjoyed, and see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye!